Yes, and certainly when there's picky eating syndrome, there's a lot of ritualized behavior. Children have to have the food be in the same color, the same shape, the same temperature, sometimes eaten at the same time. There's a lot of that kind of ritualized, obsessive kind of, a compulsive kind of behavior.
Are we just really starting to understand this, that there are so-called picky eaters? I think this one website has helped a lot, and we actually know people personally who have said, "Oh my God, I have lived my life where I can only eat 7 different things, and I thought I was the biggest freak, and I just thought it was me." And to know that there are other people out there, is this something that's just coming to light?
I have to tell you that it has been under the rug for way too many years. And it's fascinating for me because as an eating disorder therapist, my Empowered Parents site gets letters from parents on an ongoing basis. And I would say 95% of the letters that I get from desperate parents are parents of toddlers and of latency age children. And they do not know what to do about the fact that their children are eating very limited amounts of food. I mean, the average amount of food, let's say a food type or actual food that a person with picky eating would take in would be maybe 12 to 15 foods. So
do they tend to be a certain kind of food?
They tend to be foods that are processed, that are white foods, that are made with flour and sugar. What's interesting is invariably there's rarely a vegetable eater among picky eaters, and there has been research recently that shows that there is a gene that controls receptors for bitter tastes, and that people with variations of this gene tend to become sensitive tasters, and as a result vegetables taste metallic to these people. So yes, picky eaters tend to stay far away from vegetables. But the point I wanted to make about how these disorders are so little known is that when parents go to their pediatrician to ask about what they should do with this problem, it's so ironic that pediatricians invariably will say that if the child is on the growth charts and is fine for weight and height, that it's a passing phase, it's nothing to be concerned about, it's certainly not pathological. That a lot of pediatricians will advise parents to simply just let the child be hungry and eventually he'll eat. It doesn't work that way with picky eating syndrome, because the fear can be so great. And this is what people underestimate, I think, how tremendous the fear is. You know, I have been told on a number of occasions that parents have offered children all kinds of rewards. $500 if you'll eat this piece of steak on the plate, and invariably the person cannot do it to save his or her life. So I think that pediatricians really need to open their eyes to the fact that it's a very common problem these days, and because it's not been diagnosed, because it's not recommended that people get treatment, because it's not even seen as pathological, what happens is that children and adults end up feeling very badly about themselves. It's very common to see low self-esteem. Children feel that they have invented this problem because they'd never heard of it before. They feel like damaged merchandise, like somehow they've trumped this horrible thing up and it's disturbing to their families, and it makes chaos for every meal, and invariably these kids are seen as manipulative, attention-getting. They are seen as willful and stubborn and obstinate, when in fact they are frightened children who are really suffering. So I think, and we should say too that when children are not treated and they grow up to become picky eating adults, because they do not grow out of the problems, as many pediatricians have told parents, these people carry with them this lifelong burden. It's really a compromised existence that they live, because they become socially alienated. They are rejected by life partners. These people can't eat in a restaurant. They can't travel. Even professionally, it gets in the way when people are having a happy hour or a business lunch together, because the stigma is so tremendous, and the embarrassment and shame and guilt is terrific to deal with. So I think it's pretty terrific what Bob Kraus did in starting this Picky Eating Adult website. I think he's done a tremendous service for all these people who have been so isolated and alone with this problem that they've carried with them as a handicap, in a sense, throughout their lives.
A lot of parents will see this and say, oh, man, right now my 4-year-old only likes hot dogs and chips and ranch dressing, and iceberg lettuce. Do I have a problem? As a parent, how can you figure out this is something I have got to deal with right now, or they're always told they'll eat when they're hungry. Just keep putting stuff in front of them. How do they figure out that this is going south fast?
Yeah. See, what you're talking about here is essentially the issue of nature versus nurture. That, there are some children who will exclude certain foods from their diets because of preferences. But the key is that a preference is not something that is going to affect an eating lifestyle that's going to deny a child the capacity to eat a healthy, well-rounded, have a healthy, well-rounded diet. And what we see with picky eating disorders is that it goes so far beyond preferences, because it is something that feels to the person as though it is completely beyond their choice. And it is based in the sensory integration problems. It is based in neurological, and also in genetic
Would
problems.
one of the signs be you try to get them to eat it and they immediately start gagging? Or is there I guess I'm looking for, how do you decipher this is something out of their control versus they just want to only eat chicken nuggets? Do you know what I'm saying?
I believe that the strength of the response in the child is what the parent will read. Because these kids are not fooling. They mean it. They are terrified, and they cannot face these foods. I mean, there are some children that cannot even look at certain foods or touch certain foods. The sweetest story I heard this week from the mother of a 5-year-old who said that her son was so terrified of dipping his pancake into a little cup of syrup for the first time, that he asked her if she would mind just coming over and sitting next to him and holding his hand while he did it. And he was successful. But you see, that's the kind of behavior parents are looking at. These kids are not being bratty. They are being themselves, and they are asking for help. And I think parents haven't been given the support that they need to know that even if these problems are neurological, even if they are biologically based, I believe that, especially in this day and age when there is so much that can be done with the plastic changing brain, that parents can do a tremendous amount. I mean, for sure, people need to diagnose a problem and begin to solve it straight away. Could I talk a little bit about what to do and how to think about solving this problem?
Let me first finish the setup. So, if they are having, like you explained, this 5-year-old's response to dipping a pancake, if they are physically, retching or pulling back, any other sign? I mean, for parents, before they go to their pediatrician and say, "You're nuts, I need to start finding someone else who understands this," is it you keep introducing foods, and if the reaction is absolute horror, is that another sign? I mean, some more other things that parents should be on the lookout for.
I think that parents may see children even as young as, high chair, 1.5 years, when they're first starting to eat, that they may have problems handling a spoon in the mouth. They may not want to have anything tactile in the mouth. And that, by the way, is one of the great benefits of the Feldenkrais method and the Bunyell method, because the practitioners who do this wonderful sort of reorganization of the nervous system can actually put on a glove and put their hands into these little mouths and begin to manipulate the tongue and work with the internal tissues of the mouth and introduce, in a loving, gentle, gradual, non-threatening way, new sensations.
But what about for those who have the genetic predisposition to bitter? What if it is really just about the flavor?
There are going to be things that these people are not going to be able to conquer, I would guess, in a lifetime, perhaps. But I have another story, if you have time to listen.
Sure.
An adult man who went to visit my daughter-in-law and son-in-law. He was there for dinner. This was just recently, and she made an elegant meal, and he was a picky eater. He told her so, but she asked if it would be okay if she put a Brussels sprout on his plate, if he would try to eat it. And he was not able to, and she fully was sympathetic and understood, but was so happy to get an email from this man just a couple of days ago saying that he had been able to try asparagus, and she would be happy to know that he had success eating it. Now, this man was in his late 30s. He was just now able to try asparagus, and it went down. And he was happy about it, and he wanted to share it. It's a pretty marvelous story. I have a very optimistic feeling about the capacity of human beings to change, always to change, and find a different way, and to find alternative solutions. And timing is everything in life as well. Life experience changes our brains. I mean, all kinds of things will come together to ultimately help a person reach recovery. But people have to know that this is a very nuanced, very integrative kind of disorder. I mean, we're talking about it's affecting not only the physical self, the neurological self, the behaviors. It affects the emotional self, self-esteem, and the socializing self, and the life of the family. So it's very integrative, it's very nuanced. There are going to be different things that'll come in at different times, different positives. People will take it at their own pace as long as they have the sense of can do, of will try, of I'm not in this thing alone, that there are many others like myself, that loved ones are behind them, and that they fully understand.
Have you been following the research out of Duke at all on this?
Not specifically, no.
Okay, there's a researcher there who's really focused in on this, who's looking at it. So I think that's helping too. Mm-hmm. That it's kind of coming out of the dark, like you say, and to have someone at Duke actually acknowledge this and the university actually putting money into studying it, I think will help too.
Yeah.
And then the treatments. I mean, now for adults, I don't know. We'll talk about just for kids, the treatments.
Well, I can talk about both, actually.
Sure.
First, I want to say that parents need to be the number one team captain when it comes to treatment. Parents of young children, they need to become educated, and they need to, in fact, educate their pediatricians, and they need to educate their child. And when I say educate the child, what I mean is the child really has to be handled in a very sensitive way, and that child has to come to understand that he or she is not alone, that this is a problem, it's a serious problem because it affects how he or she eats, and we have to eat 4, 6, 7, 8 times a day. As human beings, we're supposed to be eating at least every 4 hours. So food becomes the enemy, and it's a constant in a child's, in a human being's life. So I think parents need to say to children that this is a kind of tasting disability, in a sense, and like all disabilities, it can be, a rough road. It can be hard work to overcome it, but that it is absolutely essential, and it improves a quality of life, and there's no reason not to continue to push forward knowing that this person has loving support. So I do think a parent needs to be very clear with the child, letting the child know that he or she is not bad or naughty, or is not a pariah who has some kind of a horrible internal structure that can't be reckoned with. But now, in terms of, were you going to ask something?
No.
Okay.
We're going to talk about how much time do I have?
Oh, because I have a few more things to say about treatment, if we can.
Yeah. Okay.
We okay?
Good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in terms of things to do first, I think parents need to make sure that children or adults that they see a medical doctor to be sure that there are no organic problems having to do with the digestive system, having to do with swallowing. I think parents of young children need to make sure that the children have supplements of vitamins. I think adults need the same thing. Sometimes children may need Pediasure or Ensure Plus, or maybe even shakes with lots of protein in, so that they're not missing nutrients that are necessary. And because these are integrative disorders, I think that the treatments need to be behavioral, which could include occupational therapy and speech therapy. Those therapies will provide strategies. For instance, introducing new foods on the side of the tongue where the taste buds are not so strong. Or food chaining, which is a matter of modifying foods that a child is familiar with, modifying it gradually, and maybe changing the temperature, maybe changing the shape of it, or maybe combining it with something else that the child's like, to expand the repertoire.
I mean, start with the food that they know and like.
Start with the food that they know and like.
Pasta, and actually cut it one time, or have it, with something else. Is that what you're saying when you say food chaining? Definitely.
To keep building on the progress that you have with whatever the augmented food choices are, to keep building with them. And I think that there's a place for psychotherapy as well, for the person who has poor self-esteem about this, for the family who has to learn to cope with this. And I also feel that neurologically, that we are so fortunate to live in an age where the work on the brain has been so tremendous and wide-ranging, and I think that to work directly with a young child on reorganizing the central nervous system, reorganizing brain fibers, this is where it's at. And I believe that if people find Feldenkrais therapists or Anat Baniel method therapists, and I'll give you the information for the website, that there are over 7,000 therapists who work with these kinds of problems today. 30 years ago, they were not. But we live in an age where these services are available, and I think that people should take advantage of them. They can do miraculous things.